welcome once again to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mike Ehrlich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Government, and joining us today is Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Program Administrator of Public Health Emergency Preparedness and Response for the Department of Health and Human Services. I also see that joining us today is Acting Chief of Public Health Services, Dr. Christopher Rogers. I believe Dr. James Bridgers, who is the Acting Director for the Department of Health and Human Services, should be joining us soon. And we have two special guests. Keith Miller, who is the CEO of the Montgomery County Revenue Authority, as well as Dr. Joseph Viola, Viticulture Specialist with the University of Maryland Extension. They're here to discuss the Cross Wines, which is a new winery, bistro, and special events venue that opens to the public on July 8th, right here in Montgomery County. And with that, good afternoon to you, Mr. County Executive.
Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I want to start today with talking about a new addition to Montgomery County's Agricultural Reserve. I'm talking about cross vines. I've talked about that a little bit before this week, but this week we had the opportunity with 200 other people to get the first glimpse of cross vines that is poised to open in July. And cross vines is a grape crush facility intended to help grape farmers and winemakers. Though grapes and winemaking offer a high value crop to farmers, it often takes 3 to 5 years to produce a full crop of grapes after you plant the vines. And then the equipment for turning grapes into wine can add another $1 million or more to the costs for a vineyard. And for a lot of farmers, this is a pretty big lift and a long time between planting and harvesting a crop. And the combination of the planting time and that investment, plus the need to bring in your own equipment, is often an impediment. And this crush pad is going to enable farmers to start growing and use the cross vines facility to destem the grapes, crush them, and then process the juice into its final destination, a wine bottle. This facility is going to ease the path for farmers to add grapes and wine to their production. And it's also going to be an event and meeting space as well as an educational space. Cross vines started as an idea at least 11 years ago when I was a council member. I went to a meeting, it was a conference on winemaking in Maryland, and I heard Kevin Addix speak. And back then, Kevin, who's now the Secretary of Agriculture, was the representative for state wineries. And he was talking about, the general bad reputation for wine in Maryland and why we hadn't been able to replicate what Northern Virginia was able to do. And he said that the reason we hadn't replicated Northern Virginia's wine country model had more to do with our winemakers and less to do with our environment. And the winemaker issue was largely that many of the farms and original producers of winemakers were amateurs. They just got into it, they planted some grapes, they started making wine, but they never became, winemaking experts in large part. And so our industry didn't benefit from probably a lot of the expertise that was out there. And when I heard that, and then when it was kind of clear that we could do on this side of the Potomac River the same thing they were doing on the other side of Potomac River and produce good grapes and make the kind of wines that people are going to want to buy, I started looking at how we would make that happen in Montgomery County. And I had long conversations with the county executive, Ike Leggett, back then, and with Keith Miller, who is going to be speaking to us later today, about what we could do to build a crush pad in Montgomery County and kind of launch this. The idea that small farmers would be able to bring their grapes to the crush pad and have them do the processing and get them into the business at the lowest possible cost. He also explained some of the flaws with crush pads, and I proposed an operational structure that would avoid the problems that had arisen elsewhere. One of the things was some crush pads actually produce a single wine from the grapes of all the farmers who are members of the crush pad. But if the farmers aren't vested in the wine, if they simply are guaranteed sales of their grapes, they may not always tend to their grapes as well as they would have if their quality of their grapes was going to be dependent on the wine that they were producing. And so in this case, we're providing a facility for independent farmers to come in and produce their wines. I wanted to introduce a crop in Montgomery County that would increase potential incomes of farmers in order to help ensure the viability of agriculture in Montgomery County, which was the goal of creating the Ag Reserve in the first place. And I knew that that wine offered the potential. As when it leaves a farm in the form of a grape, it's like the number 4 valued crop. But if it leaves the farm in a bottle, it's like the number 2 valued crop. And so I felt that introducing this into the county at scale would open the door to farmers having more income options and help make farming a viable project for the long term in Montgomery County. It took a lot of partners and coordination to get us to Monday's ribbon cutting. I wanted to thank the University of Maryland for helping us build the Crossvines facility the right way. I wanted to thank the leaders in Poolesville for trusting us when we came to them with this idea. I still remember the meeting we had out on a field there by the golf course and talking to the leaders of Poolesville about what this would look like. I want to thank the state leaders who shared the vision for Crossvines and supported our requests for state assistance to build this project. I want to thank Kevin Addix for sticking to it and providing education and support to Keith Miller and myself. I want to thank Keith for looking at my idea and then going out and exploring whether this was real or not and concluding this is something we could actually do, and then going forward with this. And I want to thank our partner, Mark Weller, who's known for many other things, but he's also the person who was involved in the design and the construction of the facility, which is going to be capable of hosting banquets, weddings, big parties, and just be a great place to gather. So a lot of things came together to make this happen. We're still a few weeks away from the opening to the public. The first visitors can arrive there on July 8th. It's also an educational facilities for farmers and winemakers, special event center for businesses, and programs at Montgomery County are going to be developed or are already existing to help create a new generation of winemakers in Montgomery County. So it's great to see Montgomery College, with support from the university system, making sure we've got the educational components that are part of building a complete wine country. So my hope is that sometime in the not too distant future, people start talking about wine country in Montgomery County. We've got some good vineyards up there now. We need a few more there up to actually call it a wine country, but I think we're going to be able to do that. And this gets us on that path. So now I want to bring on Keith Miller, the CEO of Montgomery County Revenue Authority, and Dr. Joseph Fiola, who also played a role in helping us understand what we could do there. And he's a viticulture and fruit breeding expert at the University of Maryland, to talk a little bit more about what people can expect and how we got here before we take questions about Crossvines. So I'll turn this over, starting with Keith.
Thanks very much, County Executive. And I want to just thank everybody for taking the time and allowing us to be here today to talk a little bit about the program and Crossvines. As County Executive just kind of really highlighted to everybody, there's a lot of different initiatives that are happening out at the Crossvines. The mission of the Crossvines is to create economic opportunities and investment in ag tourism, event services, and, as you just heard, the winemaking industry sectors of Montgomery County, and specifically the Montgomery County Ag Reserve. In addition to the winery, the facility includes a commercial kitchen in the county's Ag Reserve with the goal of supporting farmers. We will also support ag tourism by providing products for sale here at the facility, as well as information on where those items are produced, the hours of operations, and how to get there. You know, the synergies, and one of the things the county exec came to me and we talked about years ago was how do we help the farmers in Montgomery County? And I think the programs that we're putting together, we're working with the education partners on culinary and hospitality programs that are going to be centered at the facility here to support those programs, as well as educating people to all the great opportunities for new products and different opportunities to go see in the Ag Reserve. How do we create that ag tourism? So we're working very closely with Visit Montgomery and developing programming around that and supporting not only the cross vines, but also the facilities around us. Additionally, as the county exec has stated, the genesis of the cross vines is the state-of-art production facility that has been built. As a production facility, and the county exec just highlighted, we removed one of the barriers into the wine industry. The cost of grapes and building a vineyard is high enough, and having that centralized production facilities. So farmers will be able to take a small amount of acreage on their farm or create new vineyards totally and bring those grapes to this facility. We will then take those grapes, crush them, make them into wine, and actually return it back to the farmers, as Mark said, in that higher valued state in bottled wine. So this facility will be able to take everything from the beginning grape right to the final product, and have them produce a product that they can use for sale. That is, one of the things that we've been hearing the most about in this facility is being able to do that. In addition to that, and what the real core to it is, those early conversations with Kevin Addix was, how do we partner and work on the education piece? How do we make that part of it so that we can educate the local farmer, educate the future winemakers and the next generation? I am going to turn it over, and we're very proud of our partnership with the University of Maryland and Dr. Joe Fiola. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Fiola at this point and let him talk about that. But two other points, if I could, just before I do that, is mention to you. One of the other pieces that as we built this facility, is the additional case storage that is going to be available for new wineries, because they have to have an area to store their product. And one thing that's unique about the property, with having the event center and restaurant here at the same location on the same property, we're going to offer these new wineries an opportunity to sell and promote their product right here at Crossvines. So the synergies between the restaurant, the event center, and the winery are all there to help to support these new wineries that we're going to be generating and coming on board. So with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Fiola for a couple of remarks.
Great, thank you, Keith. Yeah, you did a wonderful job, both you and the county exec, in giving an overview of the facility and how it's going to help. And you can't overemphasize how this will encourage planting of vineyards in the region and in the area. It's always been very expensive to plant both a vineyard and then think about all the expertise and the facilities you need to make the wine. And the fact now that all they do have to worry about is a small acreage where they can grow the grapes and have all the winemaking expertise and facilities there, state of the art, is really encouraging. And literally just last night at the facility at the open house, I got to meet with 3 people, one existing farm that they've been doing vegetables and cut flowers, and they're now planting a vineyard because they see the opportunity there for having value-added products there. One woman who's from France, her family's been in the wine industry for multiple generations. She couldn't afford both the winery and the vineyard now, and now she's decided yesterday, seeing the place, that she's going to plant the vineyard because she doesn't have to worry about the expense of the winery. So that was exciting. And a couple other farmers came over and said now they see the opportunity there. So that's going to be great, and all that will help. Also, again, the support of the local fruit farms to be able to come in and be able to process their, whether it's their small fruit into jams, whether it's apple growers making hard ciders and things like that. It's really going to be a major help to them, where they don't have to be concerned with the food safety issues and all the equipment and input necessary. Exciting part for me, as you mentioned, is the educational component. I do research and extension. So I work with the commercial industry. This will take care of a couple of components there of the university, both research, education, and the teaching end of it. We have a 3+ acre research vineyard there. We can use as demonstrations so people and local farmers can come in and say, okay, if I'm going to plant, what do I plant? And we will have the demonstration vineyard right there. They can show you the types of grapes to grow, specific down to rootstock and clone, and then all the different cultivars that do well in that particular area that I've been doing research on for the last 15 years or so. They'll be able to eventually taste the wines from those grapes that will be made right in the facility there. So it'll be a great demonstration, not only for the winemaking, but for the vineyard end of things, and how to trellis things, how to do canopy management. It will be both a viticultural and winemaking facilities to help, and that's going to be very useful. Another exciting point is that we have the University of Maryland fermentation degree just starting up at the University of Maryland College Park, as well as Shady Grove. They're going to be working together. So they're going to be teaching the educational components and the classes within, but the important thing from the industry standpoint is to be able to teach people and give them the hands-on experience. The degree at the university is going to be a science degree. It's going to be a very basic science degree, but this facility gives the students there the opportunity to say, okay, I want the fermentation degree, but I eventually want to be a winemaker at a winery. They can do internships here at the Crossvines, get hands-on experience in making the wine themselves, handling commercial level equipment. So eventually they'll have their degree and they can say to the local wineries, hey, I have hands-on experience in making the wine. It's not only a book degree. So that's going to be hugely helpful for them in the future. And we look to bridge that gap and having Montgomery County University and the local community colleges having viticulture degrees, where you have a 2-year degree in viticulture and enology, or even a certification where they can come in, get their education, short-term applied education, and then use that experience that they've gained at the Crossvines, both in the vineyard and at the winery. So lots of wonderful opportunities that we're real excited about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fiola and Mr. Miller and County Executive. Members of the media, we're going to open it right now for the Q&A portion of this presentation, questions regarding Crossvines. And raise your hand right here on the chat if you're interested in asking any questions to our presenters today. No questions about the new winery bistro and special events venue? Okay, going once, going twice. I don't see anybody raising their hands right here on the Zoom platform. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon. You can stay here for the rest of the public health update and other topics, or you can say goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. County Executive.
So I just want to add a couple of things to this discussion. We talked a lot about the wine, but the creation of a wine country is a big deal. Right now you can come into Montgomery County and visit and hit a few wineries in a day and you're done. But if you know anything about, the area in California or in Virginia, there is enough density of wineries that sometimes people take multi-day trips. And so the other beneficiaries of this is going to be hotels in Montgomery County and restaurants in Montgomery County, because the more wineries that happen, you can only visit so many wineries in a day. I've tried. I know there's a limit. And so if you're in wine country, you'll start planning trips where you see some wineries on one day and you go visit another set of wineries on the next day and you're staying overnight. And those are the kind of things that are going to drive other aspects of the economy that benefit from agriculture, but themselves aren't directly tied to agriculture. So there's a lot coming from this that's going to benefit Montgomery County, and I am looking forward to July 8th and the beginning of putting this facility into full service. In other news of the day, this week we cut a ribbon at Montgomery County's 4th microgrid and 2nd resiliency hub. And I've talked about these before as we look to electrify buses and upgrade community centers like the one in Potomac, Scotland neighborhood. A microgrid uses solar panels to turn the sun into an energy source, and it can be used as a power facility and save on energy costs, but taking the next step, also storing that power so it can be used on demand is what turns this into a resiliency hub. And on Tuesday, we celebrated the resiliency hub set up at the Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center in Durwood. After 5 months of construction, it became operational in November 2022. And I think people might remember what happened in November. There was this airplane and it crashed into electrical tower wires near Montgomery County Airport in Gaithersburg, and the plane was stuck there for several hours. And the crash and the response and the recovery kept about 100,000 people without power for several hours, pretty long into a cold night. 2 people were rescued from the crash, and then crews got to work restoring power. But the resiliency hub at the Animal Service Adoption Center, which had only been open for 10 days, made it possible for the facility to remain open throughout that. And the dogs, cats, birds, rabbits, and snakes were not forced out because of the power outage. Refrigerated medicines stayed cool, the heat lights remained on, and nothing was out of place because the resiliency hub worked as expected. And this is the same principle that's at the resiliency hub at the rec center in Scotland. If we wind up with a power outage and people need to keep their medicines refrigerated, we're going to have a place to do that for people. So these things are important, and it's great to see we're on our 4th and there are more to come. I want to thank Green Structure for their work turning our idea into something viable, and I want to thank David Dice's leadership again at the Department of General Services. This is something Montgomery County is leading the way on. And we can't expect to meet our climate action plan goals of reducing greenhouse gases by 80% by 2027 and 100% by 2035 without projects like this. And we're also building models for other communities to follow. We know we're not going to change the world in an instant. And we know that if Montgomery County is the only place that does this, then we're in deep, 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 deep trouble. But the things we do in the county are often models for other people who wonder what's possible and don't know as much as we've been able to learn about what's available and what's possible. And our ability to demonstrate that something can be done becomes a useful model for other people. I know that we gave a tour to new state legislators at the beginning of the session. One of the places we took them to was one of our bus facilities that has a solar power and has a microgrid. And they wanted to have a lot of questions about that. And they were surprised at our answers that, that this was actually feasible. It was not rocket science, and it was something that they could replicate. And it planted a seed in any number of their heads about what they could go forward with that they hadn't thought they could go forward with. And, a lot of the skepticism about being able to do things comes out of not having models that you can look at and say, oh yeah, they were able to do it. And I think one thing the county will continue to provide to people in this country and elsewhere is models. And I'll be honest, we actually learn from other people's models. It's not like we're inventing everything new here, but we're trying to apply things as rapidly as we can. And we're certainly in the forefront of change in this area. I hope that people ponder what's happened over the last week or so. And if you woke up this morning to the news about a moderate drought and concern about the need to put water restrictions on, should this drought continue the way it's going now. We dealt with fires last week that are coming from hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And the only reason we're not in the midst of smoke right now is the wind shifted. It wasn't because the fires went out. And at one point, Canada had over 400 fires, 240 of them were out of control. And there's concern that these fires will continue to burn through the summer. We may face other episodes of smoke when the wind chooses to blow from north to south and down the East Coast. So we're not out of it yet, but it's another indication of what's happening with climate change. This morning, you got to read about the drought. Last week's story was the ocean currents that come from Antarctica and how they appear to be slowing down, and that has major ramifications for sea life and also for climate. So we are in a fight, and at some point we've got to think about this like you would think about being in a war and what you need to do to win that battle. I think over the years, this country in general has been pretty either dismissive or lackadaisical in its response to the problems we're facing. And, people used to talk about this is going to happen in 2050, this is going to happen in 2100. All those dates are creeping closer to where we are now. And it's not that we're getting closer to 2050, it's that the things they thought were going to happen in 2050 and 2100 look like they're going to happen sooner with greater impacts. I think also last week, Phoenix basically said no more new construction because they're running out of water. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and not all of it's happening here. And like I said, not everything we do will solve the world's problems, but we need to do our part and hopefully be an example so that other people, as the severity of our situation sinks in, understand that we can show people how to get this done. And we've got great teams here, and both our residents who've worked to create the climate plan and the folks in our administration who are working to implement things. There's a lot we can do, and there's a lot we're going to keep doing. So you'll be hearing more from us on climate as we move forward, and there are going to be some other new exciting things to announce. And I hope everybody pays attention to what we're doing. Other news also, this week, we're going to give the African American Legends Awards. As we approach Juneteenth, we're celebrating it this year like we've never done before. The county is going to honor individuals who are 75 years or older and considered living legends in our community for helping shape the cultural heritage of the African American community here. These are people who've dedicated their lives to service, advocacy, and selfless acts of kindness in Montgomery County. The theme of this year's awards ceremony is called Celebrating Freedom at the Rock. Acknowledge, educate, and celebrate. I'm going to host the award ceremony at the Black Rock Center for the Arts in Germantown starting at 7 o'clock on Friday night. And on Saturday, the entire community is welcome to come celebrate at the Black Rock Center for the Arts from noon until 10 o'clock at night. The free event is meant for the whole family with music, educational activities, movies on top throughout the day. An artisans market and curated food trucks will also be available. The organizers are asking visitors who drive to park at the Montgomery College Germantown campus or Seneca Valley High School and take a shuttle bus to Black Rock. Ride-on buses will also be available from Shady Grove. So for more information about Saturday's Juneteenth event, visit blackrockcenter.org/Juneteenth. In downtown Silver Spring, there will also be a Juneteenth Black Business Expo at Veterans Plaza on Sunday from 11 to 5. More than 60 businesses are expected to be there, along with live entertainment. And speaking of live entertainment, the main stage at Ellsworth Drive will host the final day of the 14th annual Silver Spring Blues Festival on Saturday. And you can expect an all-star lineup of blues performers from 3 o'clock till 9 p.m. Tickets aren't required. Visit silverspringtowncenter.com to see the full lineup of artists. So there's a lot happening here. On Monday, we commemorate the emancipation of enslaved Americans on Juneteenth. The federal government first observed Juneteenth as a federal holiday in 2021, but Montgomery County has actually marked the holiday for 26 years. This year, we're making it a fun weekend for the entire region by hosting events Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Special events include a birthday party for Joyce Siegel. She was a longtime housing advocate for equal opportunity and housing in our area. And that party is going to be in Gaithersburg on Friday. There's going to be live music Saturday at the Bethesda Blues and Jazz Club, a festival at Cabin John Village starting at 9 a.m. Monday, and a throwback baseball game Monday evening at Shirley Povich Field in Bethesda. I don't know how many people know, but there were actually Black baseball teams in Montgomery County that competed in the Negro Leagues at the time. So we have a long tradition. Some of it people don't know very much about, but we're continuing to try to daylight more information about that. As I said, Juneteenth was a largely invisible holiday for a long time. To be honest, celebration of the 4th of July as the monument to freedom and independence rang a bit hollow in the Black community in a country that enshrined human slavery in its constitution. And in the years that followed slavery, the continuing segregation and denial of basic rights was in real contradiction to what the 4th of July was meant to celebrate. And I think of all the servicemen from the Black community who served in World War I, Korea, World War II, and Vietnam, and came home to a country that they were supposedly fighting for freedom for, not able to enjoy the fruits of that freedom when they got back from defending the country. And that's one of the unfortunate truths that we have to acknowledge and recognize. And I get irritated when people talk about not talking about the past because it'll make people feel bad. It's not meant to make people feel bad, but it's meant that people understand, you know, how we got where we are and why we have problems that continue to persist into our current times. It takes a long time to heal the wounds and to repair the damage. But the first thing you have to do is recognize that serious wounds were inflicted and serious damage was done by denying people their basic rights, pretty much into the 1960s, with lots of problems extending beyond that. The recognition of Juneteenth represents an important event, and Will Jawando, council member, aptly described it as the second Independence Day for many in our community. And I hope you get a chance to make one of the events held in Montgomery County to honor Juneteenth. This week, I was saddened to learn that Bruce Romer died over the weekend. Bruce served as chief administrative officer for the county for 12 years from 1994 to 2006, and he was a dedicated public service who collaboratively worked with others to enhance our community. Bruce served the community in many ways. He was appointed to the Montgomery County Ethics Commissions 5 years ago. He also held leadership positions in Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, the Greater Washington Board of Trade, the National Association of Counties, and the Maryland Municipal League. And Bruce also volunteered at the radio station WAMU 88.5. And I would always see Bruce down there when I would go down to the COJA show, and he was always there working and greeting me, and I just appreciated seeing him and getting to talk with him. Bruce was really committed to improving the quality of life for the people he served, and he spent his career working to make life better for people in the county. And my condolences go out to his family and friends during this difficult time, and ask residents to keep him in their thoughts. We're going to miss Bruce, but we'll not forget his work and its impact on our community. Other events this week, we honored the contributions made by Caribbean Americans in Montgomery County across the nation. This was a luncheon ahead of the proclamation we shared Tuesday at the council, and then an evening county. In the evening, we had an event in the county executive office building, which is our annual celebration. I want to thank members of the Caribbean American Advisory Group, the Office of Community Partnerships, and the county's Caribbean Liaison for their work, making sure we continue to make every community feel welcome and a part of this community we build together here in Montgomery County. And before I take your questions, just a few things about the community health report. I want to acknowledge the end of another school year. Fortunately, this school year was much easier to deal with than the past couple of school years. COVID's recession has certainly made life a little simpler to work in, and I know that many people look forward to summer and time away from the classroom. And but there will be students still in class this summer, and we're extending, the school system's extending some of its programs to run through most of the summer, and that's a good thing. And this is, one of our prime, I'd say, examples of success in the county has been our school system, and we need to keep it that way. That was the point of my efforts, to make sure that the school system got fully funded. We can't afford for the school system and the perceptions of the school system to slip, and we need to make sure that we understand the issues they face, not unlike everybody else: recruitment, retention, and the fact that higher wages are making it harder for the county to compete. And as I mentioned to people during the budget discussions, the District of Columbia raised starting pay for teachers to $75,000 for the coming year. Montgomery County's teachers, before the raise hike, they'll be getting word about $53,000 starting pay. And even with this, they'll be somewhere between $58,000 and $59,000 And obviously, having the district with higher pay is going to be a continual recruiting challenge. And that'll be amplified because by 2026, all the school systems in the state of Maryland have to have a starting pay of $60,000. And that means a teacher could start here for 60, or they could start in another county for 60. And most of the other counties in the state of Maryland have lower costs of living and lower priced apartments and houses to buy. And so if all we do is match everybody else, we're going to continue to struggle to recruit people here. So I hope people keep that in mind. We're going to have continuing discussions about how we're going to address this problem going forward. This year's budget and this year's increases do not solve it, but they certainly made progress. Having access to a school nurse on a regular basis, mental health help, or free meals throughout the week are examples of our education system has evolved from simply a place of learning to a center that helps students in a more holistic way. And that, I went to Montgomery County schools, as did my kids, and the supports that are in place today, go well beyond what was done when either myself or my children went to school here. And the support our schools provide the students, especially those that come from financially struggling families, is something that's going to be missed until the bell rings again in September. Remember, a lot of kids, they had lunch every day because they needed support to get lunch every day. And there are going to be a lot of families that are going to be struggling to feed their kids. In the summer, we have programs that will help address that. And we need to continue those programs because we cannot have children going hungry. I encourage everyone to think about and help those families this summer by donating food to local food banks and figuring out where you can volunteer to help implement the support we're trying to provide to our children in the county. I'd also like to mention the county summer reading program through the Montgomery County Public Library. Just last month, it was awarded by the National Association of Counties as an outstanding program, and it encourages regular reading throughout the summer, which helps children be better prepared for the start of the next school year. Again, as a former teacher, the issue of learning loss is a real thing. There is often a diminution of skills that kids appear to have at the end of a school year that don't seem to be there when the next school year starts. So programs like reading initiatives that carry through the summer, any programs that help kids with math and refreshers in math, gets them prepared for the next school year. So these are all important. On the COVID-19 front, we couldn't have started the summer in a better position, in contrast to a couple of other summers. Case rates are near historical lows, and hospitals are only seeing a handful of patients with COVID, far below the levels that would be needed to lift us out of the low community status. So we're happy that we're in low community status that we've been in for the last few months, and hopefully this trend will continue. New variants continue to appear, but all of them seem to have a common trait of perhaps making people sick, but not sending people to the hospital. I've had several friends and acquaintances not be able to attend meetings over the last week or two because they got COVID again, but in all cases, their cases were on the mild side, and nobody went to the hospital. So that's encouraging. I still encourage you to get your bivalent booster if you have yet to get one, and you can still book an appointment through the county or your physician's office or a nearby pharmacy. And with all that, I'll turn it over to Sean O'Donnell. Take us through his report before we take any topic questions you want. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Should be sharing this now. Okay, I'll take you through this very quickly just to give folks an update. Before I go into COVID, I just want to let our partners know that we've continued to follow up with the measles case and investigation that we reported a few weeks back. We are now outside of the incubation period for anyone who may have been in contact with that original case. We have not identified any new cases, and so we believe that transmissions have probably ended. And just as a reminder, that was a case that likely developed the infection due to an international travel, not a local transmission. So we're happy to see that there were no new cases, and we credit that largely to the high vaccination rates that we have in our county for measles. Looking at COVID, again, we're tracking the variants. While the percentage of new types of variants continues to change, we're not seeing the overall cases that we've seen in the past when new variants have come up. So we likely have immunity largely to these variants, or at least immunity from having more serious illness. I know there's still individuals who are getting COVID, but we're at some of our lowest transmission rates in years, as well as with our hospitalization rates continue to be relatively low. You can see here, looking at the entirety of COVID, we'd have to go back to about July of 2021 to see transmission rates as low as what we're seeing now. Again, hospitalization rates, we're down to only 13 patients across our hospitals with a COVID diagnosis. Across the state, it's about last week, the counts were about 90 patients in Maryland hospitals with COVID. It's down to about 63. So again, this is all very good news. And the monthly COVID deaths, if I go back to May, we were below 10 in both May and currently in June. So those numbers are not actually reported, the specific numbers from the state, but you can see even with the state numbers, with 45 deaths in May in the state of Maryland, that's lower than any other point since COVID began. So we're happy to see these numbers continuing to trend down. So far, 17 in June. Again, we're encouraging people to stay up to date on their vaccinations. We'd like to see these numbers come down to 0. And those are all the updates I currently have related to COVID, related to measles. Dr. Bridgers, do you have anything else, or Dr. Rogers, anything else you'd like to add from HHS?
Good afternoon, all. Mr. O'Donnell, nothing to add from HHS. Happy to support the county executive and any questions that reporters may have today.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Members of the media, this is a time for our Q&A again. Please raise your hand right here on the chat, and we'll get started as soon as you engage. I'll give you a second or two.
I just want to add one more thought to what Sean said, and that's that COVID is now something nobody has to die from. And so whether it's one person or 10 people or 100 people, getting vaccinated keeps that from happening. And people need to let that sink in, because we should be looking at deaths from COVID as totally unnecessary deaths. They're things that didn't have to happen. You know, a family didn't need to lose a grandparent, a father, a mother, or a kid. So I hope people will, take this seriously. Fortunately, most people in Montgomery County have taken this seriously. Take the boosters seriously, because you don't want to be in a position where you don't have the protection that's put us in the position where the cases we get are mild. But I hope most people continue to do the right thing, but it really is tragic that people are still dying from something they don't need to die from. Just sad.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, any questions for the officials today? No questions? Going once? Twice? I guess we're done. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Stay safe. Have a great afternoon.